Hello, this is Giant Girl 4, and this is a video that's sent to one of my favorites, Five Nights at Freddy's well, I wouldn't really say conspiracy theorists, like sometimes he does cover conspiracy theories about the game, but I would say like theorists in general, named whose name ZombieWarsSMT. I really love his channel, although the interesting thing is that I would like to point out is that I feel like that there's one thing that he could have covered, but, didn't. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, maybe I'm just, over speculating here, but I actually found some, really interesting information in the Five Nights at Freddy's, jumbled message from Scott that you can find his Scott Games channel that I don't think he found. Now, I'll go to the video, and I'll show you what you mean. So, first I'm gonna skip it, and as you could see, he has, like, the entire jumbled thing, and, at first it doesn't really seem like there's a lot, but...
see that there is a, Five Nights at... the fact that
But here's one thing that I know is that surprisingly, Zombie Wars didn't know, so I find really interesting. Now, this is a clue. Now, this is a very interesting clue that I'm really surprised that Zombie didn't get. I don't know, maybe he was just so amazed by the fact that Five Nights at Freddy's, 3 is even coming out that he didn't notice, but look at this. This is obviously a clue. Five Nights at Freddy's, 30 years later, and then it says copyright 2007. Now, this tells me a lot of interesting details because, one, it obviously isn't going to be, when the game is going to come out since, like, Five Nights, crap, I almost said Five Nights at Freddy's, that, that obviously, 2007 isn't going to be when the game's coming out because, 2007 is, like, 7 and, almost 8, wow, it's been so long, like, almost 8 years ago. And what this tells me is that, it's 30 years later, and 2007. Now, what this tells me is that, copyright 2007. This was one thing that this tells me is that the game, Five Nights at Freddy's 3, takes place in 2007. And this seems really interesting, and it makes sense, too, because haven't you noticed that, Five Nights at Freddy's seems to have, a little bit, a very 70 type number? I mean, in Five Nights at Freddy's, 2, it took place in 1987. In Five Nights at Freddy's 1, while game theorist claims that, it takes place in, 1993, it could very well take place in 1997. And the original, time Chuck E. Cheese came out is 1977. So, if Fredbear's Diner, or heck, even the first ever Freddy Fazbear's Pizza that was, associated with Fazbear, Entertainment, theoretically came out in 1977 like Chuck E. Cheese, then the second game would come out 7 years after, the first one. And one thing that clears to me in the phone guy, another clue that the phone guy says that, it's been 20 years since I think the game, first, not really the game, but, since the establishment, first came about, basically. So, if the first came out in 1977, and if the second game came out, the second timeline of the game, like if the first came out in, the first Freddy Fazbear's Pizza came out in 1977, the second coming out in 1987, and, the cheap version came out in 1997, then it's 2007, that would very well be, 30 years. That would be 30 years into the future, like it claims, which is very, very interesting, a very interesting clue there. And another reason why, I think it would make sense for, Scott to do this is because I feel like Scott is very interesting with the story. Like, he's one of the few gamers in where it's unpredictable, like, what he does. I mean, it's just really interesting. The second game was a prequel, and the third game, I think, is going to be set into the future. But I think the bad thing with, a lot of people nowadays is that we were like, oh my god, everything's gonna be super, futuristic, and it's probably gonna be set in, 2017. And, well, and that's good and all, but it depends how far is it in the future. And the interesting thing is that some people think it's going to be set in 2017, which is like 2 years from now, or heck, even 2027, which would make sense if they're saying 30 years after 1987. However, it doesn't really seem that it's, 30 years after 1987. It seems to be 30 years after, the Five Nights, the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza in general. Now, if game theory is correct, if it's correct that, that there's 3 different Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, one being the one that came after Fredbear's Diner, the other one being the one, the second game, and the one being the third game, then what probably means is that it's saying that it's 30 years after the very first, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, which came out the same time that Chuck E. Cheese did, and that is 1977. And the main reason why I'm comparing it in Chuck E. Cheese is because it would make sense. I mean, Freddy Fazbear is obviously, a parody of Chuck E. Cheese, and I think there's already, evidence that supports, a lot of what I'm saying. So I need to take a quick ring. So anyways, I know I keep pausing everything, but this is what happens when you don't make a scripted video. Like, you just keep rambling on and on. This is why you get your pencil and actually write. But, yeah, I could have made a scripted video, but I was just so excited. And I found this really interesting. I'm surprised that Zombie Wars has never noticed this. Like, I actually checked in the comments to see if anyone noticed this, but literally, like, I was literally the only one that noticed this and pointed this out. So basically, this video is for Zombie Wars. I hope he sees it, and if he doesn't, then I will send it to him. And basically, it's supposed to be my take on what the third game will be like. As for the only one part, I don't think it's the only one animatronic, because even if it's because, he only put one animatronic in there because people complained there were too much, I don't really think it seems like Scott to do that. I mean, heck,